If you want to help Myth Vision Podcast grow, you can join our Patreon. There are different tiers, as well as help out with PayPal. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Dr. Price. Ryan Bland asks, Dear Dr. Price, do you date the Habakkuk Pesher from Qumran in the 1st century CE? And is it important to have a later date than the consensus view? Is there a difference between the spouter of lies and the wicked priest? If so, who do you think they represent? Thank you for all you do, Dr. Price. You have literally transformed my way of thinking for the better.
Didn't we do this one?
We touched on this.
Well, in any event, I don't know enough about the carbon dating controversy. I've heard both things, that it showed it was impossible for the scrolls to date from the 1st century, and that it shows that some do date from the 1st century. I have no idea, so I'll have to wait till I hear more about that. But I think that we talked about paleography once in this connection, the science, so-called, of dating a manuscript document by its handwriting style, since if we have enough samples of writing done in a datable period, we can compare a particular undated document to the different periods and see where it seems to fit. Like, you can see signatures in books from long ago that are much more florid than ours and so on. Well, that is not that clear in the case of the scrolls, because partly there are not enough samples for us to be sure and what it belongs next to, partly because in sacred texts there was a tendency to mimic older scriptural copyist styles. So we don't really know exactly. What Robert Eisenman does is to say the Pesher and some of the other ones are from the 1st century, and that if you look at the most likely candidates for these characters that are only designated by ciphers, like the wicked priest, the spouter of lies, the teacher of righteousness, and so on, the Kittim, that it seems to fit best from the possible scenarios. The notion of at least one previous scholar whose name I cannot remember, I'm sure I will as soon as this is over, that the Qumran community was the Jerusalem church, and that the teacher of righteousness was James the Just, and that he was put to death by the wicked priest. Well, according to the Josephus passage, if it's referring to James, and according to Hegesippus, James was martyred at the behest of the priest, the high priest, Ananus. And as for the spouter of lies, we're told that, and I guess, the spouter of lies would have been one of the members of whatever the community was, the Jerusalem church or whatever, and that he had a split with the community because of his outreach to the, quote, simple ones of Ephraim, and that the majority perceived what he was doing as betraying the covenant, so he either left or was kicked out. And Eisenman says, boy, to me that sounds an awful lot like Paul, who had a breach with the Jerusalem church eventually over precisely this issue, his welcoming Gentiles in on reduced terms and making it too simple. You don't have to be circumcised and all that. And he goes through various instances of technical vocabulary they use that are so strikingly similar that he thinks that's the best guess. Of course, there are other possible guesses that would also fit the 1st century, like that of Barbara Thiering. And she said that she's not the first with this, that the teacher of righteousness would have been John the Baptist, and the wicked priest from their standpoint would have been Jesus, because he welcomed tax collectors and sinners and was no longer an ascetic like John the Baptist was. After all, to Jesus himself is attributed this quote, John the Baptist came neither eating nor drinking. You say he's a demoniac. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. You say, look at that glutton, that drunk. Which do you want? Which way is it going to be? Well, that if you lived that way and you were in the Qumran community, yeah, you must have split with him. And she has a plausible case, too. I just, personally, I find Eisenman's a little more compelling, but they're both reasonable. Others have said, the Catholic view, because mainly Catholics who were given the scrolls to study for decades, they said that the wicked priest, I think was John Hyrcanus, one of the Hasmonean priest kings, and the teacher of righteousness, I think was some character whose name we don't know. I could be wrong. And so they suggest like a first or second century BC scenario there. But any of them could be right, because they hid the characters behind these cipher titles. And Barbara Thiering really goes to town on that and comes up with some interesting stuff, though the more fascinating it is, the more far out it seems to be. And yet she knows things about calendar lore in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi documents and so on, that I don't think anybody can match. And she bases some of her dating on that. Well, I'm not going to challenge her on it. So there's a lot of interesting possibilities floating around.